The morning everything changed, I was sitting at my desk in downtown Boston when the security alert came through. I opened the app on reflex, expecting the usual: a delivery driver, a neighbor's dog, the wind rattling the gate. What I saw instead was my husband standing on the porch of my parents' beach house, laughing. Not nervous laughing. Not the kind that comes when something has gone wrong and a person is trying to hide it. He was laughing like a man who had just won something, easy and open, tilting his face toward the ocean. The blonde woman in the sundress had already gone inside. Champagne flute in one hand and a designer duffel slung over her shoulder, and Greg stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking out at the water as if the tide itself reported to him. My father's gardening hat lay in the dirt beside the porch steps. I stared at it for a long moment. That hat had been faded blue once, worn soft at the brim from 20 years of Saturday mornings, mowing lawns, fixing gutters, hauling lumber, changing oil in second-hand cars. All the quiet, unglamorous work that had kept our family breathing when I was growing up. It lay face down in the sand now, because Greg's mistress had kicked it there on her way inside. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "I need you to listen carefully," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. "My husband just illegally removed my parents from the Seabrook property. He brought private security, he is claiming ownership. He also brought another woman into the house." There was a half-second of silence. Then Marcus's voice shifted. Professional, sharp, ready. He asked whether I wanted local police contacted. I told him not yet. First, I needed the deed pulled, the closing documents, the wire confirmation from my personal account, the security contract, the smart lock administrator logs. Everything. Then I asked about the Harbor Ridge condo, the one titled under Vance Holdings. The one I had purchased through my company 3 years earlier, where Greg's parents currently lived. I told him to prepare the paperwork. Effective immediately. Then I looked back at the camera feed. Greg was standing in the open doorway with one arm around the blondie's waist, kissing her neck while she giggled. I watched, and what surprised me most was the silence inside my own chest. No trembling. No urge to scream. No tears gathering at the corners of my eyes. Just a cold, flat clarity spreading through me, the way ice forms over still water. My marriage had not died that morning. I understood, in that moment, that it had been dead for years. I had simply been too occupied paying for the flowers on its grave to notice. I told Marcus to send security to Harbor Ridge. Peaceful removal only, no raised voices, no threats, 2 hours for Greg's parents to gather essentials. Climate-controlled storage at my expense, 3 nights in a hotel on my company account, and I asked that Greg be notified after the locks were changed. Not before, after. I ended the call and stood in the middle of my office. Outside the glass walls, downtown Boston kept moving in its ordinary way. Phones ringing. Assistants crossing the floor with folders. Men in expensive suits arguing over acquisitions, as if the whole of life could be reduced to square footage. Maybe it could. Greg had certainly taught me to think in those terms. For 8 years I had funded his image. The custom suits. The leased Range Rover he referred to as his, the private club membership, the fake investor dinners. The consulting firm that had never consulted on anything meaningful. I had married him when he was charming and hungry. When he called me brilliant before anyone else did. I had believed that meant he saw me. Now I understood what he had actually seen. The safest bank he would ever find. My assistant Claire appeared in the doorway, took one look at my face, and asked no questions. I told her to clear my afternoon and call Nathan Rosenthal, my divorce attorney. She nodded once and turned away. That composure was why I paid her more than half the junior brokers on my floor. Before I left, I opened my bottom desk drawer and took out the small leather folder I kept there. Inside was our postnuptial agreement. The document Greg had signed 2 years into the marriage, after one of his business disasters had nearly pulled my name into a lawsuit. He had been too arrogant to study it, too relieved by the bailout, too comfortable in my money to notice the language. Separate property remained separate. Assets purchased from my pre-marital equity stake remained mine. Any deliberate false claim against my separate property would trigger reimbursement, damages, and attorney fees. Greg thought he was starting a property war. He had no idea he had walked barefoot into a room full of broken glass. My parents arrived at my penthouse before I did. When I stepped into the foyer, my mother was sitting on the edge of the cream sofa in the cardigan she kept for windy beach mornings, her white hair flattened on one side, her hands wrapped around a mug she had not touched. My father stood at the windows with his medication bag tucked under his arm, looking down at the city. He looked smaller than he had that morning. That hurt more than the cheating. Dad had been a steel worker for 34 years. His shoulders had carried lunchboxes and lumber, and my mother through chemotherapy. He was not a man who cried easily, not a man who complained. But when he turned and saw me, what moved across his face was shame. As if he had done something wrong by being thrown out of a house I had bought for him. I crossed the room and took the medication bag from his hands and told him he was not trouble. My mother told me what Greg had said to them, that I had lied, that Greg had paid for everything, and my parents were embarrassing him by acting like owners. That my father should have known better than to accept charity from a daughter who did not understand marriage. Greg had not just evicted them, he had humiliated them. There was a difference. One was illegal. The other was personal. I sat between them and took one of each of their hands. I told them the house was theirs to live in for the rest of their lives, bought with my money, in cash, and that Greg had not contributed a single penny. My mother said he had sounded so certain. I told her that frauds usually did. My father said they could go back to the old apartment. He said they did not need all of this. I told him no, firmly, and then again more softly when they both stared at me. I told them they had worked their whole lives, that they had gone without vacations so I could have textbooks, that they had driven cars with rusted doors so I could graduate without debt, that they deserved the ocean, and quiet mornings, and a porch where no one told them to leave. My mother covered her mouth. My father's eyes went wet. Then Marcus called to confirm that Harbor Ridge had been secured. Greg's parents had initially refused to leave, but once building management reviewed the documentation, they exited. Their belongings were going to storage. The hotel reservation was in place. Greg had been notified. Right on cue, my phone began lighting up with Greg's name. I read his messages aloud to no one in particular. His outrage was predictable. How could I do this to his family? Was I insane? Who did I think I was? I looked at the last message for a moment, then laughed once. It was not a happy sound. My father, who was a fair man, said Greg's parents were elderly and had not done this themselves. I told him they had benefited from it. My mother asked what would happen to Greg. I opened the security app and turned the iPad so my parents could see. The video rewound to the moment Greg stood on the porch with Amber. Dad's face hardened before the kiss even happened. When the woman kicked his hat into the dirt, he inhaled through his nose and looked away. My mother did not cry. She went very still. And then she said that the girl had stepped on your father's things. And my father said quietly that she had kicked his hat. I nodded. And then my mother. The woman who apologized to waitresses when they brought the wrong order, who sent Christmas cards to neighbors, who never remembered her name, who had once told me to be patient with Greg because of his boyish smile, lifted her chin and said, "Then don't you dare feel sorry for any of them. You bring us home, Diana." I told her I would, and she added, "When you're done, you stop paying for that man's life." Greg called 27 times in 1 hour. I answered on the 28th, with Nathan Rosenthal sitting across from me, yellow legal pad open, silver pen moving. I put the call on speaker. Greg's voice exploded into the room. Accusing, wounded, performing. He said my parents had been occupying property purchased with marital funds. I told him they had not. He said I didn't get to just say that. I told him I had the deed, the closing statement, and the wire transfer from my separate personal account to prove it. He changed tactics. He said he was trying to protect us, that my parents were acting like they owned the place. I told him they had permission to live there, from me, the owner. He said my money was our money. Nathan looked up from his pad and mouthed, silently, "No, it is not." I asked Greg if he remembered signing the postnup. The silence that followed was longer than the others. He said I always brought up paperwork to intimidate him. I told him I brought up paperwork when someone lied about ownership. He said he had not lied. I told him I had video of him telling my parents they were trespassing. Then I said his name, quietly, and the room quieted with it. I told him he had brought his mistress into my parents' anniversary home 10 minutes after throwing them out. In the background, I heard a small, startled breath. The woman was listening. Greg called me hysterical. My father stood up. My mother grabbed his sleeve. Nathan wrote something down. I told Greg to be careful. He asked what would happen if he was not, and I told him I would stop handling it quietly. He accused me of controlling everyone through money, and I told him I was correcting a lie with receipts. He said I would regret it. Nathan looked up sharply. I asked Greg to say it again, clearly. And when he did, that I would regret embarrassing him. I thanked him for making the threat explicit while my attorney was present. Nathan introduced himself, explained his role, and instructed Greg to leave the Seabrook property immediately, preserving everything intact. Greg laughed and said he was not scared of a lawyer. Nathan told him he should be scared of discovery. That landed. Greg understood appearances. He understood how much of his life was built on borrowed money and borrowed status. Discovery was where counterfeit men went to die. He said I could not divorce him over a misunderstanding. I looked at the frozen image on my iPad. His mistress smiling on my mother's porch, and told him he was right. I was not divorcing him over a misunderstanding. I was divorcing him because I finally understood. Then I hung up. The drive to Seabrook took 90 minutes. My parents sat in the back. Nathan rode in the passenger seat reviewing documents. Marcus followed with 2 company security vehicles and a locksmith. I drove in silence, no music, no conversation, while my mother occasionally reached across the seat to touch my father's hand. The Victorian beach house came into view slowly as we turned onto Shoreline Avenue. Turquoise shutters, wraparound porch, white railings. The kind of house my mother used to point at during summer drives when I was a child and say, "Imagine waking up there," and my father would answer, "Maybe in another life." I had bought them that other life. Greg had tried to steal it before dinner. A rented black Range Rover sat crooked in the driveway. Greg's private security stood near the porch steps, big-shouldered and cheap, earpieces, and their posture changed when they saw my caravan pull up. Greg came out in navy linen and white pants, dressed for a lawsuit he did not understand. The blonde followed in sunglasses. I walked past him without a word, went straight to the dirt beside the porch steps, and picked up my father's hat. I brushed off the sand and handed it to him. His fingers closed around it. That was the moment something changed in Greg's face. Not guilt, not regret. Calculation. He realized my parents were not leaving. He told me not to make a scene. I told him he had made the scene when he threw their suitcases onto the lawn. Amber, the blonde, offered that Greg had told her they were refusing to leave his house. I turned to her and said his name was on nothing. He does not own this house. Greg called me a manipulator of paperwork. Nathan said paperwork was also known as evidence, and Marcus stepped forward with the folder. I removed the deed copy and read it aloud. Seabrook County Recording Office. Purchased for $425,000, cash, sole grantee Diana Vance, no marital trust, no co-owner, no lien. Greg said I had used money earned during our marriage. I told him I had used distributions from my pre-marital equity stake, which he had acknowledged as separate property in the postnuptial agreement he signed. Amber lowered her sunglasses. So Greg had not told her that part. Nathan turned to the private security men and asked whether they had been told Greg had legal authority over this property. The shorter one, clearly concerned about liability, said they had been told he was the owner. Greg told him to shut up. Nathan smiled and said they would be subpoenaed. The men stepped aside. Nathan gave Greg 5 minutes to gather whatever he had brought and leave. Greg said this was marital property. I said we were married, for the moment. Amber took a step away from him. Greg's voice rose. Did I think I could humiliate him in front of everyone? I looked at my parents, at my mother's swollen eyes, at the hat crushed in my father's hands, and told Greg he had humiliated himself. I was only letting witnesses attend. He stormed inside anyway. Men like Greg never accept the first exit. Inside the foyer, He stood holding my mother's crystal anniversary vase. The pink peonies she had placed in it that morning lay dumped on the entry table, dripping water across the wood. He held the vase like a hostage and shouted that if I wanted to take everything, I could take it broken. My mother said his name. It was the saddest sound in the world. Not because she pitied him, but because she had once made him Thanksgiving pies and knitted him a scarf and told me to be patient with his boyish smile. I raised my phone and began recording and told him clearly that he was on video inside property he did not own, after being instructed to leave, and that any damage would result in charges and civil recovery. He froze. That was the real Greg, not brave, not powerful, not commanding, just terrified of being seen. Amber walked backward off the porch and called an Uber. Greg put the vase down, not gently, but intact. Then he looked at my father and asked whether he was proud of this, letting his daughter fight his battles. My father took one slow step into the house. He was 73, with bad knees and heart medication and hands scarred from decades of labor. But when he looked at Greg, he did not look small. He said he was proud that his daughter had learned not to bow to bullies. Greg sneered that my father had lived in his wife's charity house. Dad nodded and said yes, his daughter had given him a home, and that Greg had given his parents one too. Only difference, he said, was she paid for yours. For the first time all day, Greg had nothing to say. The local police arrived 12 minutes later, calm, slightly annoyed in the way officers get when wealthy people bring drama to quiet neighborhoods. Nathan provided documentation. Marcus provided footage. The private security men provided statements faster than I expected. Their company had strict liability concerns and very little loyalty to Greg's ego. The officers asked Greg to leave. He pointed at everyone in turn, including at one point, the ocean, as if the waves might testify to his importance. The taller officer said he could leave voluntarily or they could discuss trespass. Greg finally walked out. As he passed me, he leaned close and said I was going to regret making him my enemy. I told him I had made him my husband. He had made himself my enemy. He drove away alone. Amber had already gone. The first lawsuit came 2 days later. Greg filed an emergency petition claiming unlawful eviction of his parents, misappropriation of marital funds, and emotional abuse by weaponizing property access. Nathan read the complaint aloud in his office. I almost admired the creativity. Almost. My parents sat beside me, Dad wearing his blue hat again, freshly washed by Mom, who had stitched the torn edge with navy thread. Nathan filed the response with counterclaims: trespass, defamation, intentional interference with family occupancy, conversion for anything found missing, and reimbursement under the postnuptial agreement's false claim provision. All already drafted. Greg began working the social circuit. By the end of the week, I had heard several versions of myself. Diana, the greedy wife, the controlling career woman, the daughter who chose parents over her marriage, the woman who went crazy because her husband tried to set healthy limits. That last phrase told me Amber had helped craft the narrative. Greg had always been skilled at borrowing language from people who sounded more emotionally intelligent than he was. I said nothing publicly. That bothered him more than any rebuttal could have. Greg needed conflict to look mutual. He needed me screaming or crying so he could stand beside the wreckage and say, "This is what I survived." I gave him silence. Silence let the documents breathe. On the 9th day, discovery requests went out. Bank records, credit applications, business expense reports. Communications regarding Seabrook and Harbor Ridge. Communications with Amber. Payments to private security. Representations of asset ownership made to third parties. His consulting firm had no active clients. His business credit lines had been supported by personal guarantees signed in my name. Signatures I did not recognize because I had not written them. His club membership had been paid from my household expense account. His parents' condo, which he had described to friends as a little place he had picked up for them, had been purchased entirely through my holding company. Then came the posts. Amber had been photographing herself at the Seabrook house for weeks before the eviction. Soft launch at the shore. Manifesting coastal wife energy. A new chapter with a man who finally knows how to lead. One image showed her holding a key in front of the turquoise door. Greg had given her access to my parents' home, without my knowledge and without my consent. Nathan placed the printed screenshots on the conference table. My mother looked at them for a long time, quietly, and said Amber had been in their kitchen. She had drunk from her yellow mugs. I looked at the photo. Amber smiling over coffee at the window, where my mother watched gulls every morning, and felt something in me go very cold. Greg had not just wanted a mistress. He had wanted to replace the life I had built for my parents with a fantasy in which he was the generous man, the wealthy man, the owner. He had wanted to erase the truth and move another woman into it. That was when I stopped calling it a divorce. I started calling it a cleanup. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks after the eviction. Greg arrived at court in a charcoal suit I had bought him in Milan. His mother walked beside him in pearls, red-eyed. His father followed, stiff and silent. I felt a flicker of pity for them, not enough to change course, but enough to recognize that they too had been living inside Greg's lies. Nathan and I sat at the petitioner's table with neat binders and certified records and an external drive containing video clips organized by timestamp. My parents sat in the gallery behind me. My mother wore a navy dress and simple pearl earrings. My father wore his best jacket. His blue hat had stayed in the car, but I knew he had brought it. The judge, Honorable Elaine Porter, entered at 9 sharp and had the kind of face that made people regret adjectives. Greg's attorney argued confusion, miscommunication, emotional distress, marital complexity. He described it as a painful family disagreement that had unfortunately escalated. Judge Porter listened without expression. Nathan stood and corrected the framing. This was not a disagreement. It was a planned illegal removal of 2 elderly occupants from a separately owned property, followed by Mr. Vance's attempt to install another woman in that property while falsely claiming ownership. He presented the deed, the wire transfer, the postnuptial agreement, the security footage, the text messages, and the invoice from the private security company whose service description, in their own billing records, read, residential occupant removal. The judge looked up and asked, with careful precision, what that description meant. Nathan handed over the exhibit. Greg's attorney closed his eyes briefly. He had not seen everything. Nathan played the porch video on the courtroom screen. My mother crying. My father gathering his medication from the lawn. Greg shouting through the door. Then Greg with Amber. Then the hat kicked into the dirt. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the speakers. My mother stared straight ahead. My father looked down at his hands. Judge Porter turned to Greg and asked whether he had hired private security to remove Mrs. Vance's parents from the property. He said he had believed he had authority. She said that was not her question. He said he had believed marital property rules applied. She asked the question a 3rd time, and then asked whether he had verified title before acting, and then whether he had told 2 elderly people they were trespassing, and then whether he had brought another woman to the same property. Immediately afterward, Greg said yes. Nathan presented the postnuptial agreement in full. The separate property clause, the false claim reimbursement provision, the revocable license for Harbor Ridge, the hotel accommodations provided to Greg's parents, the storage receipts, the inventory report. Every answer Greg tried to bend, the paper straightened. By noon the ruling was complete. Judge Porter denied Greg's emergency petition in full. She ordered him to stay away from Seabrook. She ordered him not to contact my parents directly. She preserved my right to terminate occupancy at Harbor Ridge. She warned both parties not to dissipate assets. Then she looked at Greg and said the court was not impressed by a party who created an emergency and then requested rescue from the consequences. Greg's face went pale. The performance had no audience left. The divorce itself took 7 months. Greg fought everything until fighting became too expensive. He sought spousal support, denied. He sought a share of Seabrook, denied. He sought reimbursement for brand, building sacrifices he claimed to have made during the marriage. Nathan read that phrase aloud in mediation, and even the mediator took off her glasses. What Greg received was his own debt, credit lines in his name, business obligations tied to his shell company, unpaid tax issues I had known nothing about, a fraud investigation opened after a lender discovered signatures that did not match mine. Greg called it a misunderstanding. The lender disagreed. So did the handwriting expert. Amber deleted her coastal wife posts and moved to Miami. Greg's parents eventually moved in with his sister in Connecticut. His mother sent me one handwritten letter, 6 pages long. I expected blame. What I found instead was apology. She wrote that Greg had told them the condo was his, that he had told them I was difficult with money, that he had told them I made him beg for dignity. She wrote that she should have asked more questions. I sent a short reply. I hope you are safe and well. I cannot remain connected to Greg, but I wish you peace. I meant it. My parents moved back into Seabrook 2 days after the hearing. The first morning, I stayed in the guest room and woke before sunrise to find them already on the porch. My mother had coffee in her yellow mug. My father wore his blue hat. The stitched one, the ocean was silver under the early light, no suitcases in the grass. No rented security. Just gulls and waves, and my father pointing toward the side yard, saying he was thinking of putting tomatoes there. My mother smiled and said he had already ordered the seeds. I leaned against the porch railing and, for the first time in months, felt tired. Not weak, just tired in the way soldiers must feel after realizing the gunfire has stopped. My mother asked what I would do now. I watched the water roll in and told her I was going to stop confusing loyalty with self-abandonment. My father nodded slowly and said that sounded expensive to learn. I told him it had been. He asked if it was worth it. I looked at the house, the porch, the repaired hat, my mother's hands wrapped around the mug she loved, and told him yes. Worth every penny. 1 year later, the Seabrook house looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. My mother planted lavender by the porch steps. My father built raised garden beds along the sunny side of the yard. They learned the names of every dog on the beach and hosted neighbors for clam chowder on Fridays. On their 51st anniversary, I drove down after work with a cake from the bakery my mother liked. Dad was on the porch fixing a wind chime when I arrived. Mom opened the door before I could knock, and behind her the house was warm and lived in. Not staged, not stolen, not borrowed for someone else's fantasy. After dinner, my mother handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed photograph. The 3 of us on the porch, taken by a neighbor a few weeks earlier. My mother smiling, my father in his blue hat. Me between them, wind in my hair, looking happier than I remembered feeling. Beneath the photo, my father had written one line in careful block letters. Home is where no one can throw you out. I stared at it for a long time, and then I cried. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally safe enough to feel what had broken. 6 months after that anniversary dinner, I launched a new division at my company focused on protecting older homeowners from predatory relatives, fraudulent transfers, and coercive property claims. We offered free clinics twice a month in working-class coastal towns. My father came to the first one and sat in the back with his arms crossed, wearing his blue hat, pretending not to be proud. My mother brought cookies. At the end of the session, an elderly woman approached me with a folder pressed to her chest. Her son had been pressuring her to sign over her cottage. She whispered that she did not want to lose her home. I thought of my mother sobbing on the lawn. I thought of my father's medication bag lying in the grass. I thought of Greg shouting through the door, his borrowed security flanking him, his mistress already inside. I took the woman's folder gently. You came to the right place, I told her, because that was the future Greg had accidentally given me. He had shown me how many people could be bullied out of what was theirs simply because the bully sounded confident. He had shown me how cruelty dresses itself in legal language, how it borrows authority it does not possess, how it depends on shame to stay silent. He had shown me how important it is to answer fast, document everything, and never let shame speak louder than truth. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that first moment. My mother's voice on the phone gasping, my chair rolling back from my desk, the security app opening on my screen, Greg kissing Amber on the porch my parents had earned, the hat lying in the sand. I used to wonder what would have happened if I had driven there screaming, crying, begging him to explain himself. Now I know, he would have enjoyed it. He had been counting on exactly that. Instead, I chose silence. I chose evidence. I chose my parents. I chose myself. The beach house still stands at the end of Shoreline Avenue, turquoise shutters bright against the salt air. In the mornings, my father waters his tomatoes, while my mother waves from the porch to people whose names she knows. There is no key under any mat. But there is a security system Greg will never access again, and there is a framed photograph in the hallway with one sentence beneath it. Every time I visit, before I step inside, I look down at the porch boards where my mother once cried, and where my father's hat once fell. Then I walk through the door knowing exactly what I bought. Not a mansion, not revenge, not even justice exactly. I bought my parents a safe place. And when my husband tried to turn that safe place into proof of his own power, I took back the house, and the truth, and the life I had been funding for a man who never deserved any of it. Greg lost the property he never owned. He lost the condo he pretended to have given his parents. He lost the wife he had mistaken for a wallet. And I lost nothing that was truly mine. I only lost the lie. That was the cleanest ending of all. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.